Peace. You are tuned into Edible Activists with your host and favorite edible activist, Melissa L. Jones. On this show, we honor Black people and their stories in food and agriculture, celebrating legacy, traditions, contributions, and creativity that all stem from the land. So tune in and let's get started. Peace. I am your host and favorite edible activist, Melissa L. Jones. Today's guest is Amethyst Ganaway. Amethyst is a chef and food writer with deep Gullah Geechee heritage. Born and raised in Charleston, South Carolina, where the land, the water, and the table have always been one. Her work as a cultural archivist has taken her from restaurant kitchens to the Smithsonian and beyond, all in service of making sure Black foodways are not just celebrated, but remembered. Today, she's joining me to talk about land, lineage, and what it really means to honor every part of the animal and every part of our story. Amethyst, welcome to Edible Activists.
Hey, thank you for having me.
I am so excited to dive in. This is an honor.
Thank you. I feel like everybody who ever does an introduction for me from now on needs to just say what you said. That was like the best intro
I
I've
got
ever had
something
in
right.
my life. So I love it. I love it. Yes.
Beautiful. I mean, there's so much to talk about Amethyst, and we're gonna keep it structured because you got places to go and great big things to do as always. But I'm
Mm.
excited to introduce my audience to you. And I know many folks already know about your work, but I'm just excited to share another just amazing story. And so before the accolades and before the cookbook, Amethyst, like who taught you how to eat? Because you got something going on over there, all the things.
Yeah.
And who
Who
first put you in relationship with food and land?
who taught me to eat? My family. It's a running joke that we are all very greedy people. We love a snack. We love like it's no having just one thing for a meal. Like you have to have components, you know what I mean? We love a sweet treat. We love a little something sweet after a meal. We have always eaten very fresh, very local. Like we were I feel like not, and I speak not just for my family, but like the community I grew up in, we are like the original food snobs. Because when you grow up in a place where you have access to just so many different fresh ingredients, it's hard to go anyplace else and not compare it to what you had in the low country. So my family for sure, like we gather around the table, even though all of us have kind of spread off in our own places across the country, we all still have a lot of the same food traditions that we still keep up. Like when I'm on a call with my aunt or one of my cousins or my grandma, whoever, somebody's going to ask, well, what you making to eat today? What you done eat today? Like that is a topic that is a structured point of conversation that has to happen, right? Um, and then I would say this is the community around me, right? Like I said, when you grow up in a place where you see farmers, you see farms, you see people on the side of the road selling food. You know what I'm saying? Your neighbors bringing you food from their garden or a tree that they have in their yard. When you know you got to go get fresh fish every Friday or every time on the 1st and the 15th, like you're going to go get fresh shrimp, fresh seafood. So like growing up in the area, in the communities I grew up in, it's kind of inseparable to not have a relationship with food and land and the people that kind of cultivate both of them. So, it's a very insular community in its own way, in many, many ways. But when it comes to it, food is kind of at the center of all of that.
I have to say, Amethyst, you are one of the very few chefs that I can, look at all the amazing food that you eat, and I want every part of the animal. As someone who used to eat, maybe not every part of the animal, but my family's from the South. So, like, your experience growing up is totally different from mine, right? So, like, when my parents moved from Mississippi, I was still eating hog mogs. I was eating chitlins. Any and everything that they were still eating when they came from Mississippi. That's what we ate as a child. And then, we bridged on over to Stouffer's, once we got into like, the quick meals of convenience.
Right.
So I love how you beautifully stated that and like talking about it, there is like legit an agenda around what you're going to eat specifically in the South. As someone who
Hmm.
spends a lot of time down south in Mississippi, every single day of my aunt, my grandmother's like, "What are we eating today?" It is a
Exactly.
concentrated agenda. We're talking about it, about it for the next day. So like, I felt all of that, and I had to ask that question because obviously, like all of our upbringing when it comes to food is so different. It's just like, where did the taste come from? And like,
Yeah.
trust me, I look at a steak or any other type of meat on a regular day and salivate. But I would just have to say that like your specific craft on every part of the animal, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm about to trade in,
Yeah.
y'all.
Oh my God. I'm honored by that, but also don't let me influence you in that way. Like kinda I want you to, but at the same time, like hold strong. But it's funny too, people think, I talk a lot about obviously utilizing the whole animal or utilizing a whole part of any ingredient, but I didn't grow up eating that way. Like I did, but I didn't, right? So my grandma and her siblings did, right? They have no choice, right? You gonna eat whatever's put on the table. Now, I bounced around a lot as a kid, so I did eat a lot of things. But once I moved back with my grandmother um, is Muslim, so we weren't eating pork anymore, right? So for majority of my childhood life, and I would say up into my teens, I wasn't eating bacon. I wasn't eating, definitely was not eating no pig, no none of that stuff, right? No chitlins, nothing. Did I sneak an occasional pork chop? Absolutely. Did I sneak an occasional piece of pork bacon? Absolutely. And she's in the other room, so I'm trying to talk a little low so she don't hear me say that. She know now, like she knows now. But I didn't really get into it until I left home and left out of South Carolina and then really started working in restaurants where I started noticing a lot of the things that people were eating was just like, okay, but we eat this too, and it's not looked at the same, right? But it's really funny that that's kind of now my niche, right? Is that I talk about eating all these things, and I have eaten all these things now, but I didn't initially grow up necessarily that way. Before pre granny, yes. Post granny, or during granny time, no. Post granny, yes, right? So yeah. It took
Wow,
me leaving home to come to realize that.
that is remarkable. That is truly remarkable. Let's talk about it. And you did spend a bit of time away from Charleston. You were in Albuquerque, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
And, that place has its own deep indigenous food and land traditions. During that time away, and maybe any other place that you might have spent, at as well, did that time away from Charleston or the South in general teach you anything about home that you couldn't have learned by staying? Were there any
Yeah.
reflections of like, wow,
Yeah.
like,
There was a big time, especially during I was there, um, maybe a year or 2 before COVID, but I was there during the top of COVID, right? And New Mexico was one of the first states that immediately shut everything down. So, there was no restaurants, there was nothing. We were green for months until finally, what I'm saying, obviously it overtook. But during that time, um and I would even say before that, I got to actually like it's crazy when you grow up in a place like South Carolina, like Mississippi, like Louisiana, and you see these indigenous names of places, right? Like we have Edisto Island, we got Wamala, we got Yemisi, we got like all of these places, our rivers, our forests, all these things are named after these indigenous people, but you don't see indigenous people. Moving out there was the first time I actually encountered real life Native Americans, tribes, seeing going on and seeing reservations, like no, finding out that there's Aztec temples in New Mexico, right? Because your brain has to remember that was all Mexico. Like there's a reason why it's called New Mexico, but the way our brains now associate, the United States, like it's just really hard for my mind to kind of grasp that until I actually saw it, right? But something I realized during that kind of pandemic time when I had a minute to kind of stop and slow down was like, it's funny that this is called the Southwest because it really is like the Southeast or the South that we know it in a lot of different ways, right? Like they call New Mexico and Albuquerque like the land of mañana, which means like, they're very laid back, real chill. um People are really respectful. It's really really tight knit communities. People love to eat around a fire. Somebody, or you know what I'm saying, it's a bunch of dudes somewhere with some beers standing around a burn barrel, right? Somebody got some sort of barbecue or something, you know what I'm saying, somebody's outside cooking, there's music. There's a lot of these parallels in the way the community kind of acts. But then when you start really getting into the indigenous foodways and indigenous people there, there's a lot of similarities in obviously how people interact with the land, right? And how they interact with their food and how their farming techniques are. And like all of these things uh, that are, I mean, how I feel are all core to like any civilization and population and certain people wherever you are, wherever and whoever you're indigenous to, right? Like we have all eaten in those same sorts of ways, but it kind of, I was happy to be able to find a lot of those parallels or those intersections, really more so than parallels, between the way we live and eat out here as Black people from the South and how Indigenous and Latino people eat out there, right? Um, I realized I missed home though. Is one thing that I felt the same kind of awe as I would feel when you are watching the sunset over a marsh, or when you're watching the sun, when it's like 6:30 in the morning on a summer day, and the grass is like dewy, you kind of start to hear birds. Like there's a very specific moment, right? You would have those sorts of moments out there because there's no grass, there's no green. All you see is mountains and desert, right? And sky. It's like a complete different sort of openness and realization of how small you are in comparison to everything, in the same way that I would feel home, right? But I admit it showed how much I missed home at the same time, right? Like I miss seeing green grass, I miss smelling rain coming in. I did not realize living out there was going to be snow, like blizzards. Like, what are you talking about, right? So, like, I don't believe in it. 60 degrees is cold. I need to put a jacket on. Um, so, and I couldn't get no fresh seafood. I couldn't get fresh seafood. All I could get was like Gulf seafood. Every now and then you can get Pacific. Everything is flown in. It's a landlocked state. You got the Rio, but like you got some rivers here and there, but it ain't the same, right? I'm paying $22 for a pound of large shrimp. I'm paying $11 for a pound of okra. It's absolutely insane to me. Um, so I say all that to say I learned a lot out there. Um, a even more deeper respect for indigenous communities, and there were some really great places and resources and people I met out there that, we would talk about, even for example, okra, right? And how similar okra and nopales or cactus is, right? Like they both have this really slimy texture. They're both kind of used similarly in the same ways and cooking methods, but like nobody out there eats okra. But what if you could get people, but okra would grow great out there because it's nothing but sun, right? So how can we should be thinking about ways like that, of like, here's this kind of intersectionality between these ingredients and between these food ways, but people just don't think about it because like we have no interaction. We have no interaction. People, the same way people don't really pay attention to the South when it comes to food ways and culture, they really don't talk about the Southwest in that same way. So it was a really interesting experience, an eye-opening experience, for sure, for sure.
Well, I know you're glad you're back. You've been back. Home's
Yes,
calling you, and
yes,
what you described is so real. I mean, I didn't grow up, in the South. I spent a lot of time down there, and I just think about at a certain time of the day, what I'd be smelling right now if I was in Mississippi,
exactly.
be a
Yeah.
bit humid, a bit thick, the
Hmm.
trees, and that is so real. And so for that
Yeah.
to be like calling you back home, that is a real thing. And so I'm so
Yeah.
glad that you found your way back to Charleston.
Yes.
Amethyst, you are a chef with Gullah Geechee heritage. I want to make that, very known and clear. And so, the Gullah Geechee foodways obviously are so deeply tied to the land and the water. We're talking rice cultivation, seafood, as you mentioned, the whole ecosystem. And so, how do those roots show up in how you cook and what you advocate for today?
I mean, I think the biggest way would be seasonality first. We eat in season. You know when you can get shrimp, you know when you can get the best crab, you know when oyster season is, you're eating what is meant to be eaten at the time. It's growing, right? You're eating fresh. I always say our diet is on par with the Mediterranean diet, right? Everybody hypes up the Mediterranean. This is how we should be eating leafy greens, fresh seafood, blah, blah, blah. Like we eat the same exact way, right? So it shows up, I think, in everything I do, right? Like there's no way to kind of escape that. I'm a heavy rice eater and a heavy rice cooker. Um, our techniques, but I think what I try to do is hopefully show that our foodways are more than just rice dishes, and or even, okay, if we're talking about a rice dish, like it's not just red rice, it's not just crab rice, right? It's not just like there's a lot of other dishes. There's more complexity and depth to our foodways, and that goes for Gullah foodways, and that goes for but again, what you said, like what I advocate for Southern foodways across the entire deep south. Again, if you in Mississippi, like I know amazing chefs in Jackson, or amazing chefs in Meridian, right? Like you wouldn't think to go to Meridian, Mississippi, but at the same time you would, if you know, of course you need to go to those small towns. That's where you're gonna get the best food, right? But a lot of us eat that way, and have eaten that way. So I think it shows up in my advocating for people to realize the complexities and the depth, um, and the robustness of what our foodways are, but then also what that means to a larger part of the foodways conversation, whether that be for Southern foodways, Low Country foodways, for American foodways as a whole. You know what I'm saying? Like how it impacts um, beyond just our demographic across the corridor, right? Gullah Geechee food now is global, right? It's not as global as a French cuisine, or an Italian or something like that, but you can see Carolina Gold rice showing up on plates in Asia, and you know what I'm saying, like, and where that influence is coming from. So I hope that that's how my advocacy shows through, and showing too that our foodways are always evolving just like we are as people. Nobody's dying out. The foodways ain't dying out. The culture isn't necessarily dying out, right? Like, so to show that this is still a living, breathing thing. Um, in the foodways, I mean, like I said, it shows up in everything that I cook, even when I'm exploring other cuisines or other cultures' cuisines. I can't really deviate from what I kind of inherently already know, if that makes sense.
That makes complete sense. And affirming, confirming that this totally shows up in the way that you advocate for food. It's the power of you sharing that out and telling folks. So, oh my goodness, you all, we're going to share out Amethyst's Instagram page and her other socials so you all can follow her work if you have not, because it is incredible. It really is. And I can't wait to dive into an experience. And I'm so glad that you even just, raised the cities like Jackson, which is where my family is from. It's actually where I was born and I spend so much time. But even places like Meridian, where I've visited a number of times and passed through Meridian, where I'm going even further down into Alabama, where my mother is from. So I love to hear that because I also feel like there are chefs, Black chefs specifically, in those smaller towns that should be highlighted a bit more, and also just like advocating for our foodways too. So like I just thank you for just even briefly naming that, not being biased because it's Mississippi,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
definitely some
I mean,
familiarity.
if you in Birmingham, if you're in Mobile, you know what I'm saying? I mean, Lafayette, Louisiana, right? Like there's a million and one places that should be, that could be, right? That just aren't. and it's like you kind of you're happy that you know you got the best kept secret, but at the same time you want the world to know about this because the world should know about this, right? But it's also like, but I don't want to see it change because it will, but you just got to make sure you find those ways to make sure the right story is changing along with it by the right people. So, but yeah, man,
That is a
it's good
message.
food.
And that is a whole
Yeah,
nother conversation too, Amethyst. We won't even get down that rabbit hole, but
yeah,
that is so real. Actually, I remember um KJ of Black Food Fridays had put something up, and I think even Anella had a post around like gatekeeping, restaurants and stuff. I get it on both spectrums because you want them to flourish, right? But then
yeah,
once the crowds do come, there is this fear about it changing. Like that is like real. And so I
yeah.
feel it on both sides, but I loved how you framed it. So yeah, we should probably, that's another episode with a few other people to talk about, but thank you for framing it that way.
Yes.
Um, Amethyst, I watched Deb Freeman's Finding Edna Lewis, which is a beautiful, beautiful masterpiece. And you were featured, and just
Yeah.
I was just super excited when I saw you in that documentary. And you actually had mentioned that Charleston's, culinary history is both pain and beauty. And just wanted you just to share more about that.
Yeah. So first, shout out to Deb. If she listen, we we I'm doing all sorts of prayers for her to bring home this James Beard, okay? Because this documentary is one of the most incredible pieces, I think, of Black media history specifically, and American history and foodways and all of these things that we have seen in a very, very, very long time. So big shout out to Deb, love her the most. Charleston's, history, foodways, culture, it is both very painful and beautiful. And it's funny because I literally saw somebody else post it this morning. And it was like, it's like, you woke up and it's time to your first scroll of the day, you're reading through the feed, and I'm like, okay, this is really the first thing I see. Like my eyes, I don't even have contacts in yet. I'm holding the phone close to my face, trying to get my morning dose of scrolling in. Like that's what I see. Is like, you know, Black folks specifically who have traveled to Charleston. How do you feel when you're there? What's the city feel like? And it's always a large response of, it feels so heavy, it feels so sad, it feels so, insert whatever negative adjective you want to add into that, right? um but the post I put up a couple weeks ago kind of said this other part of it, which was, I hate that when we come here, this is how we have to feel, because what I feel is not that at all. And again, I've had to kind of like step back, especially as I've gotten older, and realize I grew up in this, right? I grew up with the cobblestone streets every day. I grew up with the bricks with the handprints in them. I grew up with the plantations. I grew up in that, with that, but I never felt bad about it. I never felt bad about it. Some of the proudest people I've ever met in my life are from the Low Country. I love Charleston so much. I got Charleston tattooed on my body. And I know a lot of people who similarly have something that represents Charleston or the Low Country or our culture in some specific way. And it's like we have so much pride in who we are. We love the way that we talk. You know what I'm saying? We love that people don't understand us, that we can get together and we start to dang on switch the way we speak. We love that. We love that people have to ask us, "Where you from?" You know what I mean? Like, we love what we eat. We know that we're different. So when I see people say those comments about how heavy they feel, it's just like, I really wish more of y'all, matter of fact, whoever's listening to this, if you ever want to come to Charleston, message me. I'll tell you where to go so that you can not feel all this heaviness. Don't get me wrong. It is heavy. It's heavy. But how can I say this? If you Black, you ain't got nothing to worry about when you come here. Them spirits ain't gonna bother you none. Okay, you are safe. You are good to go. Ain't no need for you to come here. If you're gonna feel anything, feel angry that this is what our people had to go through that, but also feel pride that this is what they were able to endure and what they were able to create. When you see all these beautiful facades of downtown Charleston, and again, you see those cobblestone streets, and you see all these beautiful 25 million plus dollar homes, we built that. That's our ingenuity. We built this entire city. We built this entire country's economy. So Charleston's history and presence is painful because yeah, 40% of us at minimum can trace an ancestor that stepped foot into this place. We absolutely, there's no way to deny and take away from that. But physically, it is one of the most beautiful places you could ever be at. You could, I mean, everybody says that about where they're from. You know, my city is the most beautiful place. There's no place like it. Sure, until you come to Charleston, or until you not even come to Charleston, until you come to the Low Country. Anywhere you go to Beaufort, you go to Hilton Head, you go to Defusky, you go to these small, you are going to feel like you stepped into a different place in a different time. And I hate and don't want people to feel heavy. I want people to realize like this is how we should be living. We should be living in communities where everybody knows each other's name. We should be living in communities where your mama still has a garden out front, or man, somebody got a yard bird out front. We should still have those sorts of communities, right? We should still be able to afford to live in places with oak trees and Spanish moss hanging down in a long driveway, and you got a deck in your backyard and a John boat. That's how we should be living. We should be more angry that that's not that has been taken away from us, and so that we should do something about it instead of coming and feeling so downtrodden, right? And that's how I say all that about the place. Apply that to the food. Apply it to
Amethyst,
the
when
food.
I've never been to Charleston, but when I'm ready, I'm hitting you up.
Yes.
And I've been to Hilton Head, I've been to Savannah, and I'm telling you, when I was in Savannah, Georgia, when I tell you just walking through Savannah, and in my mind, I'm like, everything that we see on this side of the track, because there were two sides to Savannah that I saw when I was
Yeah.
there. I was like, we built every bit of this.
Yeah.
And it is very hard not to think about that, when you're there. I mean, all of it. So again, I felt all of that.
Yeah.
Amethyst, do you believe that there is still this disconnection between the chef and farmer?
Absolutely. Um, I see it again specifically. I'm just going to, specifically talk about it here in Charleston. The best restaurants in Charleston are the ones that do have a relationship with our local farmers and fishermen, point blank, period. It's the ones who take the time to go and not just go and purvey from them, but to actually go out to those farms, to actually go out and talk to the farmers, to actually get to build a relationship with them. But the unfortunate reality across the board is that food costs are high. Food costs are extremely high right now. And that means everybody is struggling. That means everybody. That means even if you are going to buy your food from a big chef supply store, you're still going to be paying a lot of money. Now, if I want to pay my staff a fair wage, not just a living wage, but a fair wage, and still support my local farmer and fisherman, you're going to lose money. That's just the absolute reality of the time that we live in right now. And I think that is what comes really between the disconnect between a chef and a lot of the farmers. Is that it's not that people don't it's not that some people or most people don't want to be able to do that. It's just when it comes to the bottom line, you can't. Now, there are places that are more tourist traps, I guess, more than anything, that are going to have a steady supply of feet coming in, no matter what, right? Um, Again, it still comes down to bottom line, but where maybe they could afford to spend something with local, they're not going to, because it's just at the end of the day, they're not going to give up what they know to try to do something different. If you know what I'm saying, like, if it's not broke, they ain't gonna try to fix it. Um, but I do think that there's a disconnect there. But I think too, beyond chef and farmer, there's just a disconnect generally speaking with the human general population and farmers. We don't know where our food comes from. We don't really care where our food comes from. I was cracking an egg this morning to make an omelet, and I was just like, how many people actually sit here and think about the fact like where their eggs come from, right? They and you don't have because you don't have to think about that. You can just say, "Oh snap, I'm down to my last egg. I got to go to the grocery store and buy a carton of eggs." And I can go to the grocery store, buy my carton of eggs. I can self check out. I don't even have to talk to anybody about it and go and get my eggs. Or I can order it online and somebody can drop my eggs off at the door, and I literally never have to have any communication or contact with anybody else, right? So I think there's a large disconnect between people and where their food comes from. And so I think that plays a part into the chef and farmer role, but also just generally speaking, when it comes to what a restaurant can afford, it's really hard to be able to have that. But I think that that shouldn't dissuade people from building those relationships because more often than not, I still choose to believe in the power that people will do good things for each other, and I've learned in my life that all it takes sometimes if you to just open your mouth and just say whatever it is that you need, want, whatever. All it takes is for you to give somebody a hello. And next thing you know, you got somebody you can borrow that $20 from when you need that $20 or whatever the case may be. I say all that to say, I think that it's still important for people to build those relationships with one another, even if currently they're not in a space to benefit from it. I think, you know what I'm saying? I think if you build organic, authentic relationships, that at some point you will have some sort of benefit from it, even if it's just a connection, right? I've had plenty of relationships with other chefs where I'm like, man, I really need to be able, I'm trying to find X, Y, and Z ingredient. And maybe they can't get it for me, but they know somebody who knows somebody, right? So I kind of see us also going into a space of more bartering nowadays. So I think that it's important where, again, maybe you can't pay this person market value for what they have, but maybe there's some other thing that you can trade for them with them to get that thing. So I'm hoping that there's some ways like as things get really difficult for us financially and societally or whatever, like it's going to actually it's going to force us to to kind of to make those relationships and start have to start remembering like we done lived through some real tough times and now it might be our time to have to live through some. So we got to learn how to work with each other. So I'm hoping in like a really kind of messed up way. I hope it don't take us economic downfall to have that societal collapse for that to happen. But yeah, I think that there's going to be much more of a need to build those relationships and try to. But there's definitely a disconnect with chefs generally. Again, it's cheaper to go to U.S. Foods and buy a carton of tomatoes, you know, in January when tomatoes ain't even grown in January. But yeah,
I couldn't agree more. And I believe that, and this is no tinfoil hat, y'all. I'm not a theorist, but I do believe that some great collapse of some system will have to force us to think differently about a lot of things. And, I really do believe that the food crisis is here. And like that's in just so many different ways, right? Like set aside the number of families and homes who don't have food, right? Like let's put that to the side. Just with the rising cost of food, I feel like that I'm going to see just even our small food distributors or brands go out of business because those things are going to be left on the shelf because folks can no longer afford to buy a $10 carton of almond milk, regular milk, whatever. I really like that is going to happen. Like it is for me who makes a decent, living. I'm like, all right, water for the protein smoothie. I don't need, like plant milk or whatever. And so I feel like what we've seen with COVID, with folks really actually having to run to the farmer's market and run to the farmer and like nothing. I mean, yeah, like they were the shelves in the grocery stores were bare too, but people were running to the market. You couldn't get a bag of rice, a bag of beans, and I really feel like that's going to happen again because of the prices and because of larger economic issues at hand, specifically with large scale growers who won't be able to meet the demand, that I think this will actually create an opportunity to bridge tighter collaborations, but also to like really pair or to have that bondage with communities, farmers, chefs, and farmers. And like, hell yeah, food tastes much better when it is like local, hyper local, fresh, y'all. Like
Exactly.
fresh tomato.
Exactly. That's the problem. They ain't never had a fresh summer tomato with a little sprinkle of salt in that bad boy, okay?
Hello. Hello.
Listen.
Amethyst, nose to tail, whole animal cooking. I'm actually excited to kind of talk about this because we don't talk a lot about, like meats on this show. And we're not an anti-meat person. Let me make that very clear. That's not it. But we never like had like a focus or a center conversation around like this craft. And so, but Black communities, brown communities, we've been eating like this for centuries. Like this is nothing new. And so this was, it's always been done, out of love, necessities, and a spiritual respect, for the animal. And so I feel like it only becomes radical when someone else does it. But what gets lost when that tradition is repackaged without the context? And you've kind of like spoken to this a little bit above, but like other folks do it and it's this thing. It was just like when this resurgence of farming happened, when like white people were like fisting, radishes. It's like, y'all, like this is
Right.
this is nothing new.
Right. Yeah. I think, like you said, black, brown, everybody, every single, you know, culture has eaten every part of whatever ingredient they have, and what they couldn't eat they probably still found a way to use it, right? Um and like you said, most of the time that was out of necessity, not the necessity to live, because you have to eat to live. You have to eat to live, right? Everybody has to eat to live. And when that's all you have, when you ain't had a Walmart or a super whatever to go to, you ate what you were able to have. There was no being able to pick and choose. You ate what was there, right? Um, so I think, I mean, white supremacy, colonialism, all the isms have, played into that, where when it's a non-white culture eating this way, that it's frowned upon, and that it's, especially when it comes to black foodways now, it's always slave food. We don't got to eat this way no more, right? God made other animals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. um and I do want to point out too, with even within some white cultures, that is it's still looked down on too, right? In the sense of like, if it's British, if it's French, if it's any of the big countries, or it's high end, or sometimes it might be even called peasant food, right? But somehow peasant food or rustic is better. It's more elevated, right? Than our food. All we got was the scraps, and we just had to make do. And while that is a part of our story, absolutely 100%, the also reality is it don't matter what time it was, this is how we were going to eat. This is what we had to eat. Now I don't want to say that to take away, because a big part of the Black American, African American foodway experience is, yes, this was um, from true necessity, whether it was given to us or not, um, because we didn't know where we were, what was around us, like, you know what I'm saying, like we were given this thing and we had to make some up, of course. But that's not to say, you know Africans have always been eating tripe, have you know what I'm saying, always ate all these things: hearts, kidneys, livers. These are high nutrient, protein rich, vitamin rich ingredients that weren't going to waste, whether they were uh scraps or not. Um, you know, After enslavement, we still ate that way because we could make money from selling the other parts of the animal. Yeah, we can make more money selling the ham or selling the bacon or selling the shoulder. We can make more money from that. I'd rather have money so I can go buy the other things that I need and buy a house, whatever the case may be, versus, you know what I mean? Um, but I blame a lot of, I mean, I blame all of it on really white supremacy and colonialism and industrialization. When it became a point of where again we lost that relationship with our farmers or with our fishermen and or other, you know, even with a butcher, when we stopped having relationships with our food in that way, it kind of, it like cheapened it, right? Because now we have access to all these other things. We don't, again, we don't have to have contact with a, we don't have to see a chicken getting his neck wrung and plucked and all this stuff. We don't have to see that. You just go and get a chicken. Um, so like when we had that disconnect, I think it kind of cheapened our food ways in a sense. And because people already look down on our food ways, it just kind of drove the nail into the head, right? Um, you know, my kind of whole gripe around nose to tail is that white men, specifically white males, white male chefs, have been lauded as the people to bring in whatever new thing, whether it be putting pig trotters on the menu, which is just a pig foot, or whether that's, you know, bringing Carolina gold rice to the masses, right? There's always a white man behind that. And when you narrow it to just one culture, it's like, how can I say this? I always tell people like, y'all, I don't think they realize how much of their own story they miss out on when they do things like that, their own history and their own culture. When you try to flatten everybody else's to make yours seem better, but you're not doing anything special, right? You're not special. That's really what my whole thing. Like you are not special when you come to, you're not the only one, you're not the discoverer, you didn't do this first, you're not innovating anything new. You bought a pig foot with some stock, okay? You know what I'm saying? I know somebody right now making candied pickled pig feet. Will I eat that? No. But you ain't the first person to do something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, so for me, that's when it starts to just get, it gets flattened. It gets cheapened, it gets denigrated in a way that it shouldn't be. But then when it starts to spill over into how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about our foodways and our cultures, that's where I feel like it starts to become the big issue, right? Again, I hate when I see people say, oh, you know, somebody can post, especially on Twitter. Oh my God, you post on Twitter and not only got to deal with the racist bots, now you got to deal with your own people coming here and saying, we don't eat like this. And like like all just the most, like the craziest sugar honey iced tea I've ever heard in my life. And you're just like, how you think your grandmama used to eat? Your granny been sucking down on a pig knuckle. Like, please be for real. Ham hocks in the pot, chicken feet stewed down. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's so like I hate that that's kind of what it's boiled down to now is like this very like self-hatred, low racial self-esteem. Because if you hate the way that your ancestors ate, and not even your far away ancestors, your uncle, you got cousins in them boy who still eat like that, who go hunting for squirrels and go fishing and all that. Like when you talk down on the food, you talk down on them. You talk down on yourself. You talk down on a whole lineage of people who quite literally ate that way, or you wouldn't have been here, right? And then to take away all of that, like, have you even eaten any of this stuff before you just start saying it's nasty? Like, have you ever eaten it? I don't trust anybody's opinion on anything if you haven't done it yourself. So, you know, yeah.
There's so much truth, and I'm just over here cracking up because like touche, touche. Remember, I
Yeah,
was telling you about this agenda. You know, what are we gonna eat for the next day? I'm telling you, my grandmother and them is a turkey neck, a neck bone. There's not a week
period.
where it ain't a turkey neck, a neck bone. my aunts bring over pig feet, and that's
That's
no
right.
judge because I knew
Yeah.
what I ate coming up. So,
Right.
but yes, and you know what? And to think, and your reference around like when the white man does it, it becomes this thing and it's more elevated and like this
Yeah.
is,
It becomes sexy even. People salivate and they froth at the mouth when they see these things, and it's just like, I bet you that man ain't put enough salt in that dish. I know that he didn't put enough salt in it,
my goodness, some names came to
you know?
mind and some books
Yeah,
came to mind that I'm actually
yeah,
very familiar with. So, but
yeah.
we could talk offline about that. Speaking of nose to tail, Amethyst, like, listen, you are working on a book.
Yeah,
Roota to the Toota, talking about
from the root to the
everything,
tutor.
every part of the animal. Oh my goodness. When I tell you I love
Yeah,
that name, like that is such a black household like staple from the Roota to the Toota. I mean,
yeah.
so tell us first of all, congratulations. I mean,
Thank
you've
you.
done, a ton, you know, um, within your culinary journey. You have written, you have told stories, and so it's only right, to come out with a book. And so walk me or walk us into that title. And what does it mean in your grandmother's kitchen versus it landing, on a fine dining, menu?
Okay, so from the rooter to the tutor, right? That's an expression that you've probably heard in some sort of way, especially if you are from the South. Um, you might have heard eating high on the hog, you might have heard you could there's a couple of different kind of expressions that all allude to the same thing, is that you eating a weird part of an animal, you eating a different part of an animal, or you'll eat something from the nose to the tail, right? And anything in between there. But it also is in a line in the movie Boomerang. So if y'all watch Boomerang, you'll hear it. Pop says it in there. And then one of my favorite Southern rap albums, from the Rooter to the Tutor by Field Mob, um, also named their album that. And I came up with that title probably 2016, 2017. And I said, and I still have like the note in my phone when I wrote it down. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna write a book called From the Rooter to Tutor. And it's gonna explore X, Y, and Z, boom, 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 boom. Um, and somehow my now agent, my book agent, saw that. I don't know, I probably put it on Twitter, Facebook, something like that. She saw it and essentially started she like tells me that she's like, I've never signed somebody based off of a title of a book alone. Like I'm talking about, I had no proposal. I didn't have nothing. I didn't have I had a couple little writing things under my belt, whatever. So it's very, very serendipitous in that kind of way that, it's catchy, it's funny, it's going to make you kind of stop and think about, again, if you're not from the South, or if you never heard that expression, it's going to make you stop and be like, oh, what does this mean? um and once you realize what it is, and you realize, oh, okay, this got some kind of some depth to it, it's not just a funny sounding title. When you start realizing the history behind it, I think it's a good way to lean into something that people are uncomfortable with. I guess it's the best way for me to kind of say it, right? And it's also one of those things where it's like, if you know, right? Like if you know what that title, then you know that title, like that. And that's really what I wanted it to speak to. I wanted it to speak to other people from, specifically from the South, who would be like, from the rooter to the tutor, like somebody wrote, like, what is this book? Let me pick this up, and when you open it, you see, yes, you see these recipes with offal and offcuts, and you see, you know, um, some very surprising recipes with some really, really interesting ingredients that I don't think many people will actually go out and try. But for the very adventurous eater, um, I was going to say it, there's some brain recipes in there. Um, so, but you'll see something too, like living onions. Like, you can't tell me you ain't never had living onions with some grits or some gravy over some rice, like, but when you think about it, a lot of people don't eat liver, right? Or people are turned off that it's the liver, they're turned off by the irony kind of flavor or the texture of it or whatever, and I get all of that. So you'll see things like that in there. right? You'll see how to break down specific animals. You'll see all of that, but you'll see um recipes with I mean, my recipes for my vegetables were just as long. I have just as many as I do for meat because a black southern diet is really based around people. I don't understand why people don't get this. We say a meat and three. You get three sides and one starch usually and two vegetables, or you would get most like I grew up eating vegetable heavy meals and then a meat, right? Um, so you'll see a lot of that in there, but then you'll see stuff like being able to identify wild herbs or vegetables, things that grow in the South. You'll see, you know, really little, again, these kind of moments of if you know, you know, right? If you're from the culture, if you're from these certain places, you'll pick up um in little sidebars and things like that. But even in the way that I wrote the book, I wrote it in my voice. So I wrote it like a person from the South. I use finna. I say ain't like the way you will read it is the way you should read it in your head, right? And if you're not, again, if you're not from here, it'll force you to think that way and to speak that way and to read that way because I grew up being told the way we speak was country. It was backwards. We don't. It's not proper English. Especially if you're Geechee, like they if they could beat it out of you, they would. You know what I mean? Like that's how bad it was in school, to where your teachers would not. You're not speaking proper English. So to like reclaim the way even that we speak. Dr. Cynthia Green Lee, who's a renowned food scholar, actually told me, and I'm really excited. I hope I get to do an audio book for it to actually like, we need to have more Southern voices specifically being put down, whether that's in the way you write, whether that's audio, whatever, because people need to hear how we sound because we are really moving into this world now. Everybody has this very like, I forget what it's called, but we all have they're starting to all speak the same. There's no accent. We're losing regional dialects and accents essentially, so it's important for us to do that. So it's important for me to write the book in that way too. And also thinking back to some of the writers that I most admire who are also, in my personal opinion, cultural anthropologists like Toni Morrison, like Ferda Mae Grosvenor, like a Zora Neale Hurston. They wrote in the way that those people, whether they were a character or fiction or not, they wrote those people in the way that they spoke. So I think that was really important for me to put into that book. So for the title, I had to put that. I'm not gonna put from the rooter to the tutor. I don't talk like that. I say from the rooter to the tutor. If I could have said from the rooter or THA or DA, I would have, but I couldn't because that's how Phil Mob spells it on the album. So I wasn't trying to get hit with no trademark and no copyright some. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of where the name comes from. And for me, it's a way to honor our traditions, honor our culture, honor our food ways, honor us, in my most authentic way. And I'm from here, man. I'm born and raised here. I can't see myself leaving ever again. And I felt like for my first book, like if I was gonna do it, in the words of Webby, if you're gonna do it, then do it. And that's what I felt like I had to do. I had to do it.
Can I tell you, I'm loving a Webby quote. This is so
Yeah.
inspiring. There would be no shortage. There is no shortage of adventurous eaters. And I'm telling you, Amethyst, you might have to as someone who actually has not had, I eat seafood. I love me some seafood. I haven't had chicken, beef, or pork in like years. And I'm telling you, you might be the chef to pull me into a space of exploration. And the biggest thing is because like I grew up with a family who literally would bring it. Like I know those
Yeah.
stories and I'm like if I had that same experience, which I could, but like I don't have land, I don't have
Hmm.
no cattle, animals running around, So then maybe, I just think about like obviously like how the meats and food in general is like
Hmm.
processed, but you might be the one, Amethyst. You might be the one
A
chef.
little rabbit, a little rabbit won't hurt. I ain't gonna ask you to go eat no brain and nothing like that. But a little piece of rabbit, little rabbit thigh, I think you do just fine.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah,
I am super excited about this. I love everything that you're going to preserve in this book. I mean, oh my gosh, this just seems like it just runs the gamut of like so much. So you have an audience and a big cheerleader right here in front of you, like rooting
thank
you
you.
on from the Roota to the Tuta. I am
Period.
super excited about that coming out. We're going to round out in just a moment, conclude our show in just a moment. But Amethyst, what does food sovereignty actually look like on the ground in the low country and Black farming communities, and when it's real and not just a talking point?
I say food sovereignty looks like I think again, kind of circling back to some of these points that we've had of building relationships with one another, understanding that community is necessary in many ways, and community also means that sometimes you got to deal with people that you don't like, but they still part of your community, and right. But and I think that when it comes to food, again, I see that as we, whether that's black folk, white folk, whoever, us as humans have lost our ability to survive through with food. We do the average person does not know how to take a seed and plant it in the ground and make something grow, which is absolutely insane to me, right? Um, and the fact that it happened in such a snap of time compared to the rest of human evolution, right? Like we've been farming in Mesopotamia for how long? You know what I'm saying? And like now we just nobody knows how to do that. Nobody knows how to grow something. Nobody knows how to go and catch a fish or skin a or pluck a bird, not even skin a deer or something. Just like these simple things. People are afraid to go out and pull an egg from a coop, right? Like we have lost such a connection with the land and therefore our food that is like I think such a core central part of who we are as human beings as a species that again as you were saying man is some tough times, some real we already in tough times, it's about to get tougher. That's how I personally feel too, and we are going to have to rely on one another to survive whatever that may look like. um Food sovereignty means to me not just knowing how to utilize the land, but knowing how to make do with what you got. I always tell people, yes, is it good to eat fresh as much as you can? Absolutely. But that's not everybody's reality. I'd rather you eat some sort of a balanced meal. If that means you got to go get the 50-cent can of green peas, then you go get that 50 cent of green peas, and we figure out how to make sure you are eating that properly, right? Um, so we're going to have to learn how to do exactly what our ancestors have always had to do, make do with what we got and make it taste good at the same time. So I mean I would love to see true food systems being built for black people by black people, that support us as an ecosystem, and it can hopefully support others outside of our ecosystem. But I think we have to build community, true honest community with one another first, and be willing to learn, um, and learn from each other versus learning something from TikTok or YouTube, right? Like we need to be able to interact with one another as humans, um, to kind of reclaim all of these things that we should be knowing how to do that we lost knowing how to do in like 230 I would say 200 years. We completely forgot. We completely just stopped having to learn how to do these things. So that's what it looks like for me. It looks like land back. It looks like reparations. You know what I mean? It looks like equal access. It looks like our farmers getting the money that they were promised from our government to be able to do these things. It looks like our shrimpers not having to stop working because they can't afford gas. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that's what that looks like to me. But it also looks like just like reclaiming our heritage and our history. Like until you go out fishing, you won't understand how important and how fun and how like pride is a certain type of pride you get when you get to get your first fish, whether that fish is 2 inches long or 20 inches long, right? Like it's just like, oh my God, I could do this and I can catch something. And that's the first step. Now you gotta learn how to cut that fish and gut it, and then you gotta learn how to cook it, right? But hey, you done mastered step one. And that is the important part, right? You got step one, you can catch it, you can get through the rest of it at somehow, some way. But so that's what it looks like to me. That's what it looks like to me.
I can
Freedom.
I can certainly attest to the fishing because, I might not be able to skin a rabbit or deer, but I love to go fishing. When I tell you, when I catch that bream or that perch, you
Yes,
can't tell me nothing. We are celebrating.
that's
And
right.
I won't touch the crickets, y'all, because them little fuckers sting your fingers. I do the
Yes,
worms or the minnows. I'm not doing the
that's right.
crickets. But
That's
that's
right.
so real. And I have the ultimate pleasure and blessing of being able to do that with my family down in the South to literally catch the fish, immediately clean it. We ain't waiting until the next
Mm-hmm.
day. Is the
That's
next
right.
moment.
Got to.
And then most times is going in the skillet right after it's been
That's right.
cleaned. So
Yeah,
I thank you for affirming me, but I would love to see other people be able to do that, as
absolutely.
well. But that is so true. Like it's those basic, skills that like our grandparents and our great grands used to do, and they are being
Absolutely.
lost. But I will give credit too to there's circles and groups of Black environmentalists, specifically, like going out into nature, like doing the hikes and the camping, and teaching these skills that were our great, our ancestors, were doing. And so I will definitely give those groups credit as well. But like it would be nice
Absolutely.
to see a resurgence of all of us getting back, myself included, y'all, because I can tell you
That's
right
right.
now, I'm not a fan of lions, tigers, or bears, but
That's right.
Amethyst, to close us out, if you could pop up at any kitchen or location within, let's say, the next 5 days is coming up, you have like an opportunity of a lifetime to cook. Where would that be?
All right. I'm gonna give. Can I get more than one? I got like a top four. Top four. The Gray in Savannah. Mashama Bailey and Kia Damon is there. Dogon, of course, Chef Kwame, but Chef Martel and the team there. Here in Charleston, Chubby Fish. Um, and then I would also say here in Charleston, hopefully this one is going to be coming up soon. Uh, Sullivan's Fish Camp with Chef Jason Stanhope. So I would say those are um my top four.
She had it. Amethyst, she said, I got five,
Yeah.
not one. And I've heard so much about the Gray. I want to visit
Yeah.
down bad, which she was also featured, in Deb Freeman's Finding Edna Lewis. So,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, Amethyst, where can folks find you on social?
Man, y'all can find me on Instagram at ThizG. You could find me on Twitter. I'm not gonna tell y'all where. If you find me, you find me. I'll just leave it at that. But find me on Instagram. That's where I'm really most active. Or you can find me on my website, www.waterwhipping.com. There's no G on that whipping. It's just whipping.
Whipping, because
Yeah.
Amethyst is not playing. You're gonna hear these accents, okay? Get ready for this book.
Period.
Amethyst, thank you so much for spending this time with me. It was a pleasure. I'm like hoping that I can get down to Charleston and kick it with you in some form or fashion, that I'm attending an
Please.
event, a book launch, fishing. I would love to do that.
All of
So,
it.
all
Yeah.
of it. Thank you so much. And thank you all so much for
Thank you for
listening.
having me.
Of course, of course. All right, y'all. Peace. Thank you for listening to Edible Activists. You can find today's episode on Spotify, iTunes, and Simplecast, and follow along on all social media platforms at Edible Activists for updates. Want to support this platform? You can do so by purchasing our commerce or connecting with me about media partnerships at www.edibleactivist.com. In the words of Baba Tariq Adunu, there is no culture without agriculture. Peace.